Solving a quadratic equation using grouping. In the last video, we factored quadratics that had a 1 in front of the leading term. In these examples, we don't have a 1, we have a 12, and we have an 8. So we have to use a different strategy for factoring these. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the first number that's in the leading term, 12, and then the constant term, 2, and multiply them together. So 12 times 2 gives me 24. And then I'm going to follow the same process that I did when I was factoring before, thinking about all of the combinations of numbers that will multiply together to give me 24. So 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. I want those numbers to combine to get me that middle term, which is that plus 11 in the middle. So it looks like I want to have maybe the 3 and the 8. Notice that I'm looking for a positive 24, so that means that both of the numbers are going to have the same sign. In this case, they'll both be positive because I'm looking for a positive 11 in that center term. So it looks like I'll have a plus 3 and a plus 8. So what I do now is I take that middle term and I split that up. I'm going to split that into a plus 3x and a plus 8x. And then the other terms I'm just going to copy down. The next step is to do what's called the factor by grouping part, where I'll group the first two terms together and group the second two terms together. And I'm going to factor them just in those sets of two terms. Looking at 12x squared plus 3x, those terms both have a 3x that can be factored out to the front. And when I factor that out, I'll be left with 4x plus 1. Now, if the factor by grouping is going to work, when I look at the next two terms, I should also end up with a 4x plus 1 after I take the common factor out of the 8x plus 2. So I like to write that second set of parentheses to match and then figure out what needs to go in this space here to make the factorization correct. It looks like if I took out a plus 2, that would give me the 8x and the 2. So it looks like I want to have a plus 2 there. All right, now the two terms that are in front of the parentheses get grouped together. So I'll have 3x plus 2. And then I'll have that 4x plus 1 grouped together. And this whole thing is equal to 0. Now I'll use the 0 property to come up with our final solution. So we have that 3x plus 2 is equal to 0, or 4x plus 1 is equal to 0. Let's subtract 2. So 3x equals negative 2. And then dividing by 3, we get one of our solutions is x equals a negative 2/3. And then moving on to the other solution, let's subtract 1 from both sides. So 4x equals negative 1. Then divide by 4. So x is equal to negative 1/4. So these are our two solutions. Let's look at another example. Step 1 is to look at the number that's in front of my leading term and the constant term that's got no variable. And I multiply those two numbers together. 8 times negative 9 is negative 72. And then I want to put together the combination of numbers that will multiply to give me 72. That's 1 times 72, 2 times 36, 3 times 24, 4 times 18, 6 times 12, and 8 times 9. I used a calculator to figure out all these options before I made this. All right, the next step is to figure out which of those numbers will combine to give us the middle term. We want a positive 6 in the middle. Our product that we started with is a negative number, so we know that one of our numbers is going to be positive and one of our numbers is going to be negative. The two numbers that look like they are 6 away from each other are the 6 and the 12. I want my final answer to be a positive number, so I think if I do a minus 6x and a plus 12x, that'll combine to give me plus 6x in that middle term. So I'll go back to my original and I'll split the middle term into plus 6x minus 12x. Oops, I meant the other way. This should be the minus, and this should be a plus. Okay. Next, we're going to group together the first two terms and the last two terms. The greatest common factor between 8x squared and 6x is 2x. And then I'll have 4x minus 3. And then I know that I want my second set of parentheses to match, so I'm going to write it here. And then try to figure out what belongs in this space. It looks like I want to have a plus 3 there. Let's check. That'll give me 12x, and that'll give me minus 9. That works. The two items that are in green get grouped together, and then those set of parentheses match. So here's our factorization. All right, now we'll get our final answers. We have that either 2x plus 3 is equal to 0, or 4x minus 3 is equal to 0. For the first equation, let's subtract 3. And then we'll divide by 2. For our second equation, let's add 3 to both sides. And then divide by 4. So here are the two solutions. For our next set of examples, we're going to factor polynomials that are higher than raised to the second power. This should be familiar to you since we had an assignment doing this last week. So the first thing I want to do is look at all three terms and take out any terms that are in common to all three, the greatest common factor. It looks like it's an x in this case. So I'm going to think about dividing each of these by an x. That x comes out to the front and I'm left with x squared plus 11x plus 10. Now I'm going to factor what's inside the parentheses. I want numbers that will combine together to give me a positive 10. I can have 1 times 10, 2 times 5. I think those are my only options. And I want them to combine to give me 11, so I think it'll be the 1 and the 10. So this is going to factor into x plus 1, x plus 10 equals 0. I can put those numbers directly into the parentheses because there was a 1 in front of the x squared term. All right, now I've got 3 different items that are multiplied together. And so when I think about my zero product property, I have to put 3 separate equations here. So we're going to have that either x is equal to 0 coming from that first x in the front, or x plus 1 is equal to 0, or x plus 10 is equal to 0. So my 3 solutions are x equals 0, x equals -1, or x equals -10. I'm getting 3 possible solutions, or 3 x-intercepts if we were to think about the graph. And that makes sense because our original was an x raised to the 3rd power. Looking at our next example, it looks like each of the 3 terms has a 5x that can be factored out. So I'm going to think about dividing each of these terms by 5x. And then I'm left with x squared minus 2x minus 3. All right, I want 2 numbers that will multiply to give me a -3. So one has to be positive and one has to be negative. I only have one option here. It's 1 times 3. I want my final result to be -2. So I think if I do a +1 and a -3, that'll get me a -2 for that middle term. So again, because there's a 1 in front of the x squared, I can take those numbers that I found and put them directly into the parentheses. So I have 5x times x plus 1 and x minus 3. And now I split this into 3 separate equations. 5x is equal to 0, or x plus 1 is equal to 0, or x minus 3 is equal to 0. So it looks like I'm going to get 3 solutions again. I've got x equals 0 from the first one, x equals -1 from the second, and x equals +3 from the third.